All right. So thank you all again for joining, and I will now introduce today's presenter. Dr. Borges is a professor of medicine with tenure at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus and holds the Robert F. and Patricia Young Connor Endowed Chair in Young Women's Breast Cancer Research. Dr. Borges is the deputy head of the Division of Medical Oncology, the co-director of the Diane O'Connor Thompson Breast Center, co-director for the Breast Cancer Research Program, and the director for the Young Women's Breast Cancer Translational Program. Dr. Borges's lab focuses on the biology of young women's breast cancer, the interactions between breast cancer and pregnancy, and novel drug development. She's also the Chief Medical Officer for Pearl Scientific, aiming to bring a CU-based discovery to the clinic. Thank you so much, Dr. Borges, for being here with us this afternoon and presenting to our audience. I will turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Tim. That was a generous introduction. I think most of you in the CCTO office know I'm simply Ginger, who has been a part of the breast oncology program here at the University of Colorado for 23 years. And am very proud of what we do on the breast team and what you all do in the CCTO to bring cutting edge therapies to our patients. Today, I'm actually wearing one of my other hats, which is to talk to you about the ORIEN initiative at the Colorado Cancer Center. ORIEN stands for Oncology Research Information Exchange Network, and it's a consortium that got started a little over 15 years ago. And the goal of this consortium is to accelerate cancer discovery and delivering hope through collaborative learning and partnerships. And so this is kind of what the face of ORIEN looks like. It's been, as I said, over 14 years of data collection and consenting participants to one single protocol called Total Cancer Care. So if you're ever looking at patients who enrolled on your studies and you see under their research knob, they also have that study. This is what that is. And so across the consortium, all of these cancer centers that you see, there's been over 450,000 participants enrolled. And the goal is to really bring cutting edge cancer discovery through large genomic science to the forefront. These are the guiding principles. Collaboration is very much the spirit of this consortium. That's why we all use a common protocol so that the data quality and the homogeny of the data is readily there and we can easily promote partnerships and research. Inclusiveness includes not only by cancer centers, but also community providers and the participants with a strong commitment to making sure that the diverse and underserved populations of the United States are also well represented in this data set, something that is lacking from many of the data sets that are out there. And then the accessibility of the data. People who contribute can get data back, and we can share data across this large consortium. It really has been and continues to be the coalition of the willing who wants to make this happen, both across all of these cancer centers and within our own institution. So, ORIEN is the academic partners that you saw on that map who come together to consent the participants. And then it is an ongoing collaboration with an independent company previously known as M2Gen, now known as Aster Insights. And that was a spinoff of a combination of Moffitt Cancer Center and Merck that said, let's form a company that will really make this happen. And the company is really where the massive amounts of data that this generates gets housed. It is, petabytes of data, or even possibly larger than that now. But the goal is we consent participants, we collect the samples, we generate the clinical data and the genomic data that goes into this M2Gen Aster Insights warehouse. And then there are different subsets of what happens with that data. So Avatar stands for a subset of different cancers where the participants also have some of their tumor sent for whole exome sequencing, and they also have blood sent for their whole germline to be sequenced. So we have that on a large number of patients. The goal is to support intermember projects between the different academic institutions. And then there are also private-public partnerships where pharmaceutical companies or biotechs starting to look at developing the next genomic marker for breast for any cancer can uh, contribute to the support of the Avatar project or the whole Orion project at large, and then have access to all of that data. One of the nice things about this system is independent of whoever supported what data was collected, that data is then available to all throughout the network. It is not owned by any one sponsor at any time, or like we own our own institution's data, but we routinely, willingly collaborate with all of our academic partners on this. So this is more specifics about the Orion Avatar. As I said, this is a big database where they look at whole exome sequencing of the tumor as well as whole transcriptome, so both DNA and RNA, the germline sequencing, and then these patients are followed longitudinally for life for their outcome of whether their cancers come back, not come back, they've progressed on treatment, they are alive, they are dead. And that is in part unique in that there is lifetime consent and this ongoing annotation of that data over time. Most of the other big data sets out there, like TCGA or Metabrick, often will have a truncation date so that beyond that, outcomes don't continue to be updated real time. This is what our institution or this is what the whole Avatar program looks like across Orion as of last March, which is when the collection of these samples were put on pause because there's now 36,000 participants for whom we have all of this deep data. And I have it broken out by disease site because let's face it, we all kind of work in our own little disease site homes. So this gives you guys an idea of across the consortium how many people were willing to let us turn their tissues into these avatars and collect all of this data on them. And it's a very unique tool for research. I'll give you some examples. So, as those of you who work on the GYN team know, endometrial cancer is not a particularly common cancer. There's maybe 3,000 or 4,000 cases of it a year in the United States. So, for any one institution to collect a large database, that's not easy to do. But here you have 1,600 cases collected for GYN cancer. Similarly, a great example is sarcoma. So there's, not a very large number of sarcomas across the United States each year, and there's about 50 different subtypes of sarcoma. So here you have a database on which there is almost 1,800 cases with genomic information. And the beauty of it is this genomic information is free to our investigators across the Orion network. You don't need to pay to access the data. You just have to have a concept that passes a relatively supportive scientific review process. How have we fared? A little always a little competition with our other sites. So we are the fourth highest, or actually yeah, third highest contributor overall to the Orion Avatar program, which I'm very impressed about because unlike Moffitt and Ohio State and Huntsman, who had huge pre-existing cancer center databases before they joined the Orion network, at this institution, we were really a ground up build from patient number one all the way up to we are now around or above 18 thousand patients that we have put onto this clinical trial at our own institution, including the over 4,000 that we have contributed to Avatar. So, the reality is this work is not done by me. It's done by Kyra Anderson and Andre van Boekhoven and the teams that roll up to them, as well as our data team, which has been run by Carol Ann Mullen all these years. She just recently retired, but I'm sure many of you know Kyra. Let me find my advance button. So data is great, but if data doesn't turn into something by which we can learn and then benefit our patients, it's not really useful. So here's an example of just some of the publications that have come out of this large Orion database on which our PIs, our investigators, are either lead authors or contributing. So you can see my name's on one. Martin McCarter is one of our surgical oncologists. Ryan Ormond was one of our neurosurgeons who recently left for a different institution. Dr. Lamb and Dr. Eiley, you guys know from the GU program. as just some examples of who's been making great use of this data. And it keeps going, right? There's a whole second page of this. Brad Core from the Gyn Onc program, AJ from Head and Neck and Phase 1. Linda Cook is one of our senior public health researchers over in the School of Public Health. She does population science. And you guys know Rob Lentz from GI, who recently left, and Brian Haugen is one of our thyroid cancer docs. Um, Within the ORIEN consortium, there have been these things formed called research interest groups, or RIGs for short. And you can see there the different types of RIGs that have been formed. Again, it's the coalition of the willing. Folks get together and say, hey, let's all do research together. So I helped form the breast cancer RIG with some of my colleagues from other institutions. Laura Graham represents on the GU rig. Emily Bailly is actually the co-chair of the GI rig that she was part of getting off the ground from the beginning. And so these are collaborative meetings by which people come together, share ideas of how to use the data, and everybody gives feedback to try and help and strengthen the questions, or shares knowledge about what they have already done with the data or what they have already figured out, so that people don't reinvent the wheel with each new project. And at least as far as the breast cancer rig goes, it's a very open environment. Anybody could participate. So, if something interests you, you could come and log in on one of the meetings if you'd like. But this is how we are currently using this research opportunity to really get lots of projects going and move things forward. What has not yet come to pass, but is kind of the holy grail of clinical trials these days, is how could we use a large data set like this to do clinical trial matching? So there have been examples where we have tried to do this, where we took all of our avatar patients, and let's say there was a clinical trial that was going to look for a specific mutation. Here, the example is BRAF or NRAS. And so they were able to find within the avatar data set that there were 1704 cases that met the qualifying alterations being interrogated, and came up with about 479 participants who could potentially be in a specific clinical trial. They then sent this information to each of the institutions. They told us we had 35 potential people who might be able to participate in this trial, and then that information was given to the team, to the treating MDs, because just because that patient is in the avatar data set doesn't mean that it would be appropriate at this moment in time for them to be considering a clinical trial. And in this particular study, we did not participate because we had a competing trial open in that disease-based setting. But certainly we would have if we didn't have one already open. So this has been deployed. It hasn't turned into the regularly useful tool that I think it had been envisioned to be, just because it's pretty hard to get these types of things off the ground. But hopefully in the future that secret sauce will get figured out, if not by Aster Insights, by another company to which we could contribute all of this genomic data. So we currently have a large number of different types of projects that are supported by our ORIEN team. So an intermember project is these group projects across all of the ORIEN academic institutions. So we're involved in 216 of the projects that are out there. 77 have had recent abstracts at national meetings. We've written a ton of letters for our investigators for supports for grants. These data have been used in 13 different scientific forums, and as you saw, a growing list of papers being published. There have been some big projects across the institution that we have supported. So Eduardo Davila is a PhD in medical oncology who has a very novel drug going forward, and he got a very large grant from the dean called the Anschutz Accelerator Initiative to try and move this forward as a novel phase 1 clinical trial. And we helped support the preclinical data that got that off the ground. Similarly, many of you might have heard of a large new pancreatic cancer initiative that is going forward that Dr. Messersmith will be spearheading, called the Morisco Project, and they will be using ORIEN samples as a part of this. Rady is a donor here at the institution who has helped form the esophageal and gastric cancer centers of excellence. And we are also supporting that by providing samples for which they'll be doing the work. A bunch of different other PIs here. They've helped support me with a lot that's ongoing in the breast program, as well as Drs. Cabos, Diamond, and Dr. Schreiber, who is our newest med onc on the breast team. And Tori is our large thoracic oncology program. And so we have also been supporting them as well. So a lot of utilization and a lot of ways in which we are leveraging these data. One of the things that's not on this list is, believe it or not, back when the COVID pandemic was getting started and really getting going, our institution, our infectious disease team, used our ORIEN samples as the normal controls to figure out how to develop a COVID-19 test. So even something as bizarre as COVID-19 in the pandemic, ORIEN can be used for. So as I mentioned, we're up, over 16,000 patients, approaching 17,000 this year. And we do make a concerted effort to try and make sure we are getting some baseline representation of people of different backgrounds. But of course, based on who our institution and state happens to be, the dominant people who are enrolled in this are of white background. We have a good spread of ages. You can see we were really going gangbusters, and then the pandemic hit, and then we kind of came back up. And now we're a little bit down for 2026 just because we have reduced the team size for a little bit while we're building up the program again. So this is the people who helped me do the work, and they really deserve the majority of the credit. So as I mentioned, Kyra is really the blood that keeps this program going and the bones that hold it together. We have Alexis Clark, who is our head consenter, who does a great job, and she manages Claudia, Madison, and Megan. And then, as I said, we have one position open on hold. Carol Ann just retired, and we already miss her, but we have Eric, Kristen, Maya, and Jen, who are doing a great job supporting the data management. Audrey von Boekhaven in the biorepository really makes everything happen with the tissues and the samples, both for the Avatar program and the use by our internal investigators. Dr. McCarter has been our scientific representative in helping us decide which cases should go forward or not. We have great help from Kelly McBride and Denise Castillo in the finance department. Previously, Marshall Ward also helped us, and Sarah Thompson recently joined the crew, just kind of helping us with insights around the campus. And Jessica Figueroa also helps with our coordination overall. So that's who is behind the scenes actually getting all of this work done. So where do we hope to go next? Within ORIEN, there's also this expanded data set referred to as Galaxy. I don't know why there's always space names for all of these things, but Galaxy is basically all the consented patients having not the huge data set that we have for each avatar, but a more constrained but yet very robust and useful data set. So that would be like across the 451,000 cases. And we've been one of the first institutions to spearhead this, so we have that data on all of our cases. Internally, we really want to get our teams using this data, so I spend a lot of time talking to my co-PIs around the institution about how to use this data and get started. And we really hope to just see it continue to grow and move forward. So that's my last slide, because that's really what there is to tell you guys about Avatar. I'll stop sharing, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much for a really thorough and interesting presentation. So I would invite anyone on the call, if you have questions, feel free to turn on your video, come off mute. You can drop your questions in the chat, send them to me directly. I'm happy to, kick us off. So I'm always interested, I think, as someone who is kind of newer to working at the Cancer Center, I always am interested in hearing like the stories that our investigators and physicians have to share. So I'm wondering if you have like a real world example of how participating in Orion, potentially like directly impacted like a patient outcome or accelerated, research breakthrough. Do you have any stories that you can share with us?
Sure. So, on those rigs that I was showing you, there is one that is an immunology rig. And it was started by AC Tan, who used to be here at this institution, and now he's over at Huntsman. And so he's been very involved in the Orion program from the outset. And he got a team of very smart data scientists and immunologists together because one of the holy grails about the immunotherapies that we give people is figuring out who is going to be those exceptional responders and also figuring out who is going to have um, the more ominous side effects. And so they've done, I think, a great job in melanoma of really helping to define that, so much so that I believe some of their publications are being used clinically to help parse what they are looking at in their patients to predict for who might have um, a higher risk for a autoimmune type complication from their immunotherapy, and also who might not benefit from the current standard combinations and therefore would be someone you would want to prioritize getting on to a novel combination or a different type of therapy on a clinical trial. So I that's the best example that I can give you of something that has been deployed back to the clinic. Though Orion has been in existence for 15 years, it takes a long time to get all these patients accrued and get all those avatar cases and the data generated and usable, and then it takes time to train people on how to use this data. So I think there'll be a lot more examples to come in the future now that it's really a rather mature database and able to get used in that way. There's a lot of interest in very large data sets like this, so it's not just academic partnership research teams that are interested in this type of data, but even like some of the really big AI companies and data science companies out there that would probably be able to churn through this data faster than any of us can on an individual level.
Understood. That's great. Thank you for sharing that example. Um, so I see a question just came through, was sent to me. So related to how the Cancer Center is high enrolling and built the ground up, what makes an institution successful within Orion? So what would you say differentiates a highly engaged site from others?
Uh, well, it really is having committed people who want to make it happen and having people who believe that this is the right thing to do. So, I mean, I'm a breast oncologist. I knew nothing about genomic data when I took on being the PI of this. And there was supposed to be someone on the team who was the expert in that, but that didn't work out. So we sort of had to become the experts. But I knew that this type of data set was both critical for the success of our cancer center because we didn't have anything like this. And when I got here 23 years ago and wanted to do research in breast cancer, there was no existing breast cancer database. So I had to sort of build my own from ground zero. But one person building their own data set isn't super useful, right? I mean, I can share my data set, but what we really needed was something centralized across the cancer center. And so there was never a mandate. There was no mandate that any one particular PI or treating MD or team had to belong. Just went and kind of tried to advertise what we were doing, and the folks who were willing and interested to participate said, "Yeah, please send your coordinator to our clinic. Let's get these patients consented." And so you can see that is reflective in the disease teams that we have the largest numbers on, because those were the people who said, please come do this with us. And they have made use of the data. And so as an institution, I really give credit to the team because the whole Avatar project is an enormous amount of work. And there are so many different aspects of each sample that has to meet a certain QA, QC for it to then be accepted as an avatar. And then it's a pretty grueling amount of clinical data that the data team has to move forward. Compass is the data warehouse on our campus, and we get a lot of our data from them. And in the very beginning, I think it was a huge learning curve on both their side and ours as to how we were going to communicate with each other to get the data pieces that we needed, because they weren't used to what we were doing and we weren't used to what they were doing. But we worked it out. There were some fantastic folks at Compass who have been great partners with us over time. And so it really was just the fact that we had the right people. And I think that's also really reflective of just the University of Colorado. I mean, I trained back east at a institution with a bit of a reputation for not being so collaborative, and I can say it's real, right? You know, you come here and you talk to people about ideas, and their answer is, sure, cool, let's do that. Not, I don't think so. And Orion is really just reflective of that spirit across the Cancer Center. I should say we have had tremendous support from the dean. So that was Dean Riley all these years, but now also Dean Sampson, in terms of how this got paid for and how it got off the ground. And so really, I think it was there's the institutional commitment, the Cancer Center commitment, and the team's commitment. And then also all of our individual PIs and treating MDs saying, this is a good idea. I want my patients to be a part of this. And then, of course, fundamentally, we have really cool patients who are willing to say yes to this and say, yeah, you can have bits of me, you can have my data, you can follow me for the rest of my life, and let's learn something from my journey.
Thank you. Looks like I'm just going to pause to see if there are any more questions. Yeah, Natalie.
Yes, Ginger, thanks so much. I was always wondering exactly what ORIEN is. So you obviously rely on the RECIST reads, right? Or some also sophisticated imaging endpoints to do your patients who are responder and non-responder, and also maybe correlate with your genomic data sets. Do you have a specific radiology faculty who are part of your team for this?
We do not rely on RECIST reads. What gets uploaded is the actual report
From the radiologist.
from, yeah, the actual clinical report that exists in the patient's chart.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to determine how you determine the a responder versus non-responders.
It depends on the question that you want to ask. You know, the most obvious is those who do or do not develop a metastatic recurrence. And then also, while it is a little bit of a real world surrogate for progression, but change in line of therapy.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know, you can't always be sure that it wasn't due to toxicity, but we have the radiology reports so that it would demonstrate evidence of progression on those reports to confirm that it was progression as opposed to uh, toxicity. And that's true of all real world evidence data sets. Like even if you were using Flatiron or something similar, you kind of have to parse that out
Okay.
and accept a certain level of you're not quite ever going to know.
Great. Thank you. Because I'm not sure that our faculty are very involved in the ORIEN, I mean, radiology.
No, we don't have anyone from radiology directly involved because I mean, I think each disease team does things a little bit different, but like in the breast team, we do our own RECIST reads.
Okay.
Kyra, did I answer that accurately? Is there anything you would add since you are the source of all truth on data in Orion?
No, I think yeah, you answered it perfectly. So,
Okay. I pretend to be in charge. Kyra's really in charge.
that's not true.
But yeah, I mean, Natalie, if you're interested in things, the whole point of this data set is to get used. And Kyra and team are very happy to do any initial asks of the data set to give you a sense of what numbers do we have and what do the actual, you know, what's in the data dictionary and what number of patients in which different sort of area of interest, whether it's a certain drug, whether it's a certain disease, etc. You know, we're here to help. And even if we don't immediately have all of the data. It's always possible, depending on what it is you need, that it could be created specifically for a bespoke project. So if it's pre-existing in Orion, then it usually doesn't need any sort of regulatory review. If it would require going back and getting extra data sets, sometimes we have to do a secondary use protocol, but those are pretty easy.
No, I'm just asking. It's not me. So we are obviously our clinical faculty. So we just interviewed a new breast radiology person. Yes, I just interviewed yesterday, and she was highly interested to get. Yes, I know, and she's from the East Coast as well. So
Okay.
it's really great. She will be
Well,
here.
there certainly would be an opportunity for a radiologist who would be
I'll
interested. We don't say no to anybody willing to be a part of the team.
Yes, yes. So I'll once they get here, because it's a couple recruitment, I'll put you and her in touch for sure. She's
What does the other half do?
the other half is doing diagnostic radiology.
Oh, good. 2 radiologists for the recruitment of 1. That's awesome.
Well, yeah, it's great. I mean, the couple is really great. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
2 married radiologists. They must just sit around quietly in the dark together all the time.
Well, unless one of them is interventional radiologist, then they're probably a little bit more outgoing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to poke people, so they should, have some skills. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate your response to my attempt at humor.
She's actually also she's doing a lot of like biopsy, ultrasound guided biopsy. I think you will like her. So once she's here,
Awesome.
I'll definitely introduce. Thank you. Thanks, Ginger.
Great. I did have one more question that was sent to me. So you had mentioned on the topic of having really cool patients, which we do. What strategies have you seen that work best to build patient trust and encourage participation in the network?
Well, as I'm sure many of you on this call are CRCs, I recognize some names. The best way to enable patient trust is if their provider introduces the idea, and then you put a very kind, thoughtful person in front of them to do the consent. And I think we have that on both sides of the equation at this institution, certainly in the CCTO for the folks who are consenting patients to treatment trials, but also in the ORIEN team for the folks who are boots on the ground doing the consenting. And so we were one of the first protocols at the institution on the backside of the pandemic to be allowed to go hybrid with both in-person and electronic. And what I find fascinating is the statistics, because we can obviously send emails through Epic to a gabillion patients, but the uptake of who actually replies to those emails and ends up consenting is interesting. So there's about 10% of people who will just say yes without talking to anyone. I find that magical. And then of the ones who are approached in that system, I think we get somewhere around 40 to 50% who will consent that way. But when it's an in-person consenter in clinic, the acceptance rate is around 90%. So when you put the right person in front of the participant who just has that right demeanor and can answer their questions, success rates are high.
That's great. And yes, we do have a lot of CRCs and clinical staff on the call today, so that's great.
Well, those guys are the front line to how we get patients onto studies, whether they're therapeutic or something like this, like a database. So that's why we're so lucky to have all the great people we have in those roles across both sides of the equation.
Great. Well, again, this has been a really fantastic talk. We really appreciate your time. Do you have any final thoughts, any calls to action you want to share?
I mean, I'm super easy to find, guys. My email is just like everybody else's, virginia.borges, yada, yada, yada. So if you have questions or anything that interests you, you're welcome to reach out to me. Depending on your question, I might immediately refer you to Kyra. So you could also reach out to her. But, if you're interested in just more education about it or utilization of the data, we're here to help.